Hello and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour, and today is Thursday, January 14th, 2021. As always, welcome to everyone who's joining us here today, whether you're listening live or through the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered in my over 46 years of doing therapy. Grateful to announce, as always, that these tools are available absolutely free at whyagain.org. So, if you go to that website, click on the red and white bullseye in the center of the page or the link in the upper left-hand corner of most pages that says Start Here. It'll take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Rice's book. His book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? That chapter of that book is a narrative description of the primary tool in this work, and while there are a host of tools available if you scroll further down that page, the primary tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet. And it's a tool I've been using for over 16 years to improve the quality of my life, to manage my emotions, to help me navigate through the negative emotions and understand at deeper and deeper levels how that the best use of my negative emotional states is as an alarm system to alert me to the fact that there's something off in my perception. There's something about my thought process. There's something about the perception that I'm being shown that's inaccurate, and it's the vast majority of times it's inaccurate because it's related to a past memory or trauma or faulty belief that's gotten activated, and some part of my mind is trying to convince me that what it is showing me is related to the world outside me in the present moment, when it's always related to a past perception. It's always related to my belief system. And the presence of the negative emotion is best used by me as the alarm to wake me up to that fact, to give me the opportunity to make a course correction and restore what some would call the spiritual faculty of true perception, and take another look, take another chance at perceiving, at understanding the world around me and my role in it. You can also download the actual worksheet process itself. You can download a whole host of audio files of shows just like this one where people have been stepped through that process, and you can go to your app store and type in the 3 words Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness and download a completely free and private app that contains that Reality Management Worksheet, an abbreviated version of that worksheet, and a copy of the Dragon Klingon game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. And we encourage people to do that soon and often, and then give us a call. Our call-in number is 563-999-3581, and call us to let us know your experience with the tool, or ask for clarifying questions, or give a testimonial, or tell us that you think we're full of bunk and it's nothing useful in this work. But we are here to try and field those questions, explore them with you, and our intention is to be of service, to help you get the kind of benefit from these tools that everyone who's on this team has gotten. Part of that process at this point in time is that we've made the commitment to go through the Course in Miracles lessons, and we're on lesson 14 because today is the 14th day of the year. And lesson 14 reads, God did not create a meaningless world. The commentary reads, the idea for today is, of course, the reason why a meaningless world is impossible. What God did not create does not exist. And everything that does exist exists as He created it. The world you see has nothing to do with reality. In Dr. Michael Rice's way of talking about this, he would separate that out and call it actuality. The world you see, the pictures your mind is showing you as it formulates perception, has nothing to do with actuality. The world that your perception creates is of your own making, and it does not exist. Now, I would expand that to say it does not exist anywhere outside of your perceptual field. The commentary goes on to say, the exercises for today are to be practiced with eyes closed throughout. The mind-searching periods should be short, a minute at most. Do not have more than 3 practice periods with today's idea unless you find them comfortable. If you do, it will be because you really understand what they are for. The idea for today is another step in learning to let go the thoughts that you have written on the world and see the world of the Creator in their place. See the world of God in their place. The early steps in this exercise, which can truly be called salvation, can be quite difficult and even quite painful. Some of them will lead you directly into fear. You will not be left there. You will go far beyond that fear. Our direction is toward perfect safety and perfect peace. So with eyes closed, think all of the horrors in the world that cross your mind. Name each one as it occurs to you, and then deny its reality. Deny its actuality. God did not create it, and so it is not real. Say, for example, God did not create that war, and so it is not real. God did not create that airplane crash, and so it is not real. God did not create that disaster, specifically the monsoon that wiped out this village, and so it is not real. Suitable subjects for the application of today's idea also include anything you are afraid might happen to you or to anyone about whom you are concerned. In each case, name the disaster quite specifically. Do not use general terms. For example, do not say, God did not create illness, but rather say, God did not create cancer or heart attacks or whatever those specific illnesses are that arouse fear in you. This is your personal repertory of horrors at which you are looking. These things are part of the world you see. Some of them are shared illusions, and others are part of your personal hell. It does not matter. What God did not create can only be in your mind apart from God's mind. Therefore, it has no meaning. In recognition of this fact, conclude the practice periods by repeating today's idea. God did not create a meaningless world. The idea for today can, of course, be applied to anything that disturbs you during the day aside from the practice periods. Be very specific in applying it and say, God did not create a meaningless world. He did not create this traffic jam. He did not create this fear of getting cancer. He did not create this fear of my friend dying. And so it is not real. So just breathe into that for a minute, and we'll pull up the book by Pam Grout, The Course in Miracles Experiment, a starter kit, and see what her 14th lesson is. Make it fun, make it yours is the title of this chapter of her book. When it comes to revolution, we need big doses of passion and audacity. Che Guevara. Pam writes, A Course in Miracles is like anything. You make it what you want it to be. Pam writes, my guiding philosophy, if it's not fun, it's not sustainable. So I can be bothered by the language. Yes, Lesson 14 uses the controversial G word, the God word. Or I can appreciate it for the rebellious and revolutionary program that it is. I can notice the part about ditching my own personal house of horrors. I can notice the line about moving toward perfect safety and perfect peace. Tony Shea, I don't know how to pronounce his name, the CEO of Zappos, is the poster boy for making perceived unfun things fun. In fact, he walked away from the first company he built. He was 27 and it was worth $265 million because it didn't bring him joy. Zappos, which does bring him joy, is built on weirdness, creativity, being adventurous, and doing whatever it takes to give love. In corporate speak, love equals customer service. But take it from me, it's love pure and simple. Like the course, Tony eschews perfection. Jump in fast, make mistakes, it's all okay. And he eschews old paradigms. On a dare, he named his venture capital firm Venture Frogs. Who does that? And every day he does something outside the business norm, like dye his hair red or wear a mohawk. He lives in an Airstream. He spends most of his non-working time outdoors. He says he has the world's largest front porch. And he knows without a doubt that if it's not fun, it's not worth doing. So if a guy who doesn't even like shoes, he only owns 3 pairs, can turn a $1 billion online shoe company into a rockin' good time, and if you take a tour of their Las Vegas headquarters, it's better than a self-help seminar. I'm thinking we can transform this worldly blue book into weird, boisterous, meaningful fun. So today I'm going to hoop and holler and recognize that anything that disturbs me, anything that isn't out and out gorgeous, that doesn't ooze with big-ass fun, is an illusion that I concocted. And then, poof, I have the power to make it disappear. Sometimes I even ask politely. So, Pam's trying to help us understand that rather than get into some deep philosophical argument about whether the world is real or God created it or we created it, look at the fun. Look for the line in this commentary that says, you will go far beyond any fear or conflicts that this lesson initially brings to you, because our direction is toward perfect safety and perfect peace. And listen to the part of the lesson that says, just play with it a little bit, a minute or two at a time. If you do any more than 3 practice periods, it's because it's fun for you. And you will have gotten to a level of understanding where you're no longer caught in the philosophical argument about whether or not the world is true. You'll understand that what's being discussed here is that anytime my mind creates a picture of the world that leaves me feeling angry, sad, scared, hurt, frustrated, confused, tense, bitter, resentful, etc., it's because I'm not viewing the world the way it actually is. I'm not viewing the totality of the expression of creative energy in form. That I'm stuck viewing a tiny little bit of this infinite expanse of creation, and I'm spinning it and interpreting it through the lens of my past pains and fears and traumas that I've inherited from my family and the cross-generational patterns of my family. So, that's our Course in Miracles, the beginning of that presentation or discussion, especially if somebody wants to raise a hand at 563-999-3581, and let us know what are your comments, what are your questions, or if you want to type something in the chat room. We have 43 minutes left to discuss, to chit-chat. How can we support you today? The Course in Miracles as a tool is often turned into a weapon. I hope you would take something from Pam Grout's chapter of the book today to make sure you don't do that. Make it fun and make it yours. Figure out a way. If we go back a couple of lessons from to lesson or chapter 12 of Pam Grout's book, she reminds us that Bill Thetford, the Columbia professor whose plea for a better way was the beginning of launching the course, he suggested this. If a particular lesson or word or concept doesn't resonate with you, just rip that sucker out. So if there's something about this lesson that gets you primed to have a philosophical discussion with someone and you're feeling tight and tense and upset about it, or you're feeling on the defensive, you might want to take Pam Grout's advice and make it fun and make it yours. If it isn't fun, it's probably not you're not headed in the right direction. So, how can we support you? I have 40-some minutes left. I was having sessions with people last night who were put on hold because someone raised a hand. Is this Ellen? Hello? Ellen, if you're there.
Hello, I'm sorry. I was on mute. Yes, this is Ellen.
Welcome. How can we support you today?
Well, I was thinking about the whole concept of denial of illusions, which this lesson really talks about. Because if God did not create it, it's not real. So in saying that, we are saying that we are denying illusions. So I guess my struggle with this in the past has been, so if I know, for example, that, I've been told, or, I haven't, I get injured or something like that, and I know that this is not something that God created. And so the thing to do with it, according to the Course, is you deny that it's real. And I used to think that meant, oh, well then I shouldn't have to do anything about it, because if I do something about it, then I'm acting as if it's real. But the thing is, if you need a bandage or whatever it is to take care of your injury, then that's something that I believe that you need to take care of. So I get caught up in this denial of illusions versus, making them real by acting upon them. Can you talk to that?
You're probably not alone there, right? I mean, this is to begin with, we're talking as people, and most of the people who are reading this book are people who have been trained to believe that they are solid and that they are physical and that they are the direct, accurate products of their perception, and their perceptions are accurate, and yet none of that's true. So part of being able to strike a useful position to approach my life in this is to recognize the false conditioning that I've been programmed with. And most of the people who study this stuff at deep levels recognize that my mind energy and the perception that I generate is very, very powerful for me. So there are people who have done studies about how when they go to people in these countries where they believe in voodoo and someone has cursed them, they actually die. And they generate so much of this negative emotional energy that it has a direct impact on their energy system, and some people call it their physical energy system. So the two are not separate. What we're trying to understand is that none of it is cast in stone. So to begin with, rather than going from, I used to go to a doctor and I used to put a cast on my leg when it was broken, and I used to take, this for my headache or I could go to sleep at night, or I used to clean out my wounds and put salve on them and put a bandage on, and now I don't do any of that. Rather than going, strictly from one to the other, trying to pretend that I'm more advanced than I am, that's not recommended, right? We've had this discussion with people say, well, what about if Jesus were here and he's telling us that he could drink that glass of poison and not have any negative effects from it because it's not real? And okay, but unless you can do all of the things that your ascended master can do, like walk on water or drink a glass of poison or whatever, until you get to that level of the realization of your life as just the experience of energy, you probably are well suited to listen to the scientists that say if you drink a glass of poison, you're going to have negative effects. If you try and walk through that wall, it's not going to work very well. And then apply this first. This is what's been most useful to me, is to apply this first and foremost to my mental and emotional beliefs about my injuries. So, for instance...
What do you mean by that? Okay, go ahead.
Well, for instance, I was about 45 years old, and I was playing the men's roller hockey league. I was playing in that league, and I did not realize at the time that this pattern that tends to run in my family where there's this neuropathy in hands and feet was actually taking effect already, and my ankles were getting weaker the more I skated and practiced rather than stronger. And this one night, right after Thanksgiving, the Sunday after Thanksgiving, the year I was 45, I snapped my ankle in half in the middle of a roller hockey game. And it required 3 surgeries and all that good stuff, plate and pins and all that. And as I had that, this is back when I'm 45, I'm probably maybe a little less than 45. I was flooded with negative thoughts about what an idiot I was and what was I thinking, and I have responsibilities to my sons, and I never should have been playing. What if somebody, hit me in the head with a hockey puck, even though I'm wearing a helmet, and I could have been, injured and not there for my sons. And so as my bone was trying to heal, I was being flooded with all of these negative thoughts and emotions. And it took a long time for that to heal. My orthopedic surgeon was saying, wow, it's really not healing so well, and this, that, and the other thing. Well, between that time and the next time I had a broken bone, which was a couple of years later, I learned the EFT tapping technique, and I learned the Miracles Worksheet, and I was applying them in my life. So the next time I had a bone that needed to heal, the orthopedic surgeon said, wow, you're a fast healer. And I just chuckled at him, and I said, no, not really. You can remember a couple of years ago I was in here, and he goes, well, that's right. But I was doing multiple rounds of EFT tapping daily. I would do reality management worksheets on my anger and sadness and pain. I had except for the day of the surgery, I did not take any painkillers. I didn't miss a day of work. And it was all about applying these tools, not to the broken bone in my toe, but to my mental, emotional, negative response to it. Allowing them to arise and then applying the goal-canceling tool, applying the mind shifter journaling tool, breathing, using the EFT tapping. And so my experience of the process was dramatically transformed. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
I didn't try to pretend I didn't have a broken toe. I couldn't get the shoe on because the toe was bent in the wrong direction. Right? There's something had to happen to that energy system to realign it so I could even get my foot in a shoe. So I wasn't pretending I'm going to do just a faith healing here. At the same time, I was well aware that every negative thought and emotional detour I took into the negativity was stealing energy from my system, which could better be used in healing that process. So I did multiple rounds of EFT tapping rather than taking an ibuprofen when my pain would arise or throbbing in my toe. I would just sit and breathe and tap for a little bit and then get back to work. I would tap before I went to bed at night. I would tap at getting up in the morning. I would do worksheets if I started to feel frustrated or sad or angry, realizing that my experience of this disruption in the physical energy system was completely under my control, and I could either go down the negativity rabbit hole or I could choose a different path. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. So the denial of the illusion is just to get you to use a process to
choose love.
Right.
To choose a more positive, in however you want to put it into words, to choose a more positive interpretation, or to ask questions rather than to go into knowing. I want to ask, I wonder how this is going to turn into a blessing. I wonder how this holds a lesson I need to learn to move to the next level. I wonder how this is going to work out better than I could imagine. And live in that questioning rather than the knowing that, oh, doggone it, this isn't supposed to happen and I'm supposed to be a spiritual being and I shouldn't have been that clumsy. And all of those knowings are not very productive.
Yeah, I love those.
Living in the question is highly productive, highly beneficial. It helps me live in direct observation. And after years of doing that, I then stumbled across Dr. John Sarno's work, and I had for probably 25 years. Maybe not quite that long. I had a broken vertebra in my low back that happened back in 1988. And so I had all kinds of back pain, all kinds of trips to the chiropractor and physical therapist and orthopedic surgeon and all of this stuff for my back pain. And I was in a routine of doing back stretches and deep tissue massage and all kinds of stuff every day to try and stay functional. And when I didn't, it would get worse and worse and worse and worse. And then I had, exposure to Dr. Michael Rice's work and the worksheet and the EFT tapping, and I saw, little by little how powerfully I could affect my emotional experience of all of these things. I didn't instantly become perfectly healthy, but my negative emotional experiences were much easier to correct. So by the time I came across the Dr. Sarno stuff, and he was saying, you know what, you probably don't need to do all of that deep tissue massage and stretching and going to a chiropractor for manipulation every time your back, quote, goes out, close quotes. I was skeptical, as you might imagine, because I had my life evidence was when I didn't do the exercises, it got worse, and the more I did the stretching and the more I was able to stay functional. But the more I read his books, the more I listened to testimonials, the more I thought, well, this is right in line with the Reality Management Worksheet and, what the Way of Mastery is saying. So I finally screwed up the courage, the willingness to stop doing all of that deep tissue massage and multiple times a day stretching in my office between patients, etc., and just see if I could affect a change by addressing the mental emotional aspect every time there was a physical twitch in my low back. And I am sitting here today, probably 10 years later, just shocked at the fact that I have fewer disruptions in my back. I have almost 0 times where my back, quote, goes out and I can't walk or function, that I have to go to a chiropractor. And I haven't done any of that stretching for, as I mentioned, it's probably close to 10 years. And if you would have told me that that was possible, I would have pulled out my MRI and showed you, here's the crack in the vertebra, here's the disc above and below it that are bad, that have no cushion. This is why it's pinching on these nerves, and if I don't do these things, I'm going to be in horrible pain, and then I'll get paralyzed, and you don't know what you're talking about. Because I could right now, I could pull out the MRI and show you if you were here.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact of the matter is, I haven't done any of that deep tissue massage, daily stretching, alternating hot and cold, trips to the chiropractor in over 10 years. And I have less pain and frustration. And when my back does start to twitch, I talk to it. I assume it's an emotional issue I haven't addressed directly consciously. I give myself permission to do some tapping or do a worksheet or two, or have a friend come and do some of the applied kinesiology energy with me to look at the emotional issue, and the problem disappears.
That's great to hear, and I know that that's possible, and but yet I have been dealing with something similar, with my back on and off since I was a child, and then and more lately it's been in my upper back and neck area, and I go through the same thing. I think, well, I really don't need to do all these stretching exercises, but then if I don't, then it starts getting really stiff again. Now, so I do believe that, the body, as the Course teaches, is neutral. It's the mind that creates that. So it makes perfect sense that it's the mind that we need to deal with, not the body. So what was this person that you mentioned that I have never heard of before?
So Dr. John Sarno, Sarno.
Okay.
And you can find out about him by either going to your bookstore or Amazon and buying his books, or you can go to a website, and the website is All the Rage DOC for documentary. All the Rage, all one word. All the Rage DOC.com.
Okay.
And for, I forget whether it's, $6, $7, $15, whatever. I think for $15 you can own it. For $6, $5 you can watch it. You can watch that documentary. And this is a documentary film that was made by 2 young documentary filmmakers. And fortunately, it was finished so that Dr. Sarno could see it before he died. But he died probably a couple of years ago now. But he's written books leaving his legacy, and there are people who still do his work. So you can learn a little bit about, there are some people who are just, they're so willing and they dive right in and they just watch that documentary, which isn't a how-to. It isn't his actual clinical lecture about this, but some people are primed for this, and they just watch that documentary and they start applying some of the concepts and they find relief. But I'm assuming that most people are going to need to read one or two of Dr. Sarno's books and experiment with it for a bit and do more than just watch the documentary. But that's how you can get access to his work.
Okay, thank you. So I guess the key then is to recognize the illusion and, yes, deny it, but yet, deal with where it's coming from.
One of the keys in this work that we're talking about now with the Dr. Sarno thing is that we understand that there is something going on. It's just not going on at the solid physical level that we think it is. It's going on in this energetic, mental, emotional, perceptual realm. And one of the things that Dr. Sarno did was he was a back surgeon, and he wanted to learn what was the most useful part of the back surgeries he did. So he started doing research, and his research led him to the inescapable conclusion that the things he was seeing on these CAT scans and MRIs and X-rays was not responsible for these people's back pain. How did he reach that conclusion? Well, he had a set of scans, let's say 200, 2,000, I forget what the actual number was, but every one of the scans that he was looking at, sets of scans of these people who were in the study, every one of them had curvature of the spine, bulging, ruptured, herniated discs, pinched nerves, arthritic bone spurs, evidence of degenerative spine disease, etc. Every one of them had evidence of all of these physical problems. And then when they interviewed the people who belonged to these scans, whose scans these were, only 35% of them had any pain or restriction of motion. He couldn't believe it. He went back and did it again. He interviewed him again. 65% of the people that have these scans that show all of these physical problems, and he put the word physical in quotes, had no restriction of motion and no pain. And so he was left with the inescapable conclusion that the pain these people were feeling could not be caused by the picture of the physical disruption that was on these scans. So then he started doing research to try and figure out, because he believed the people who were saying, hey, I can't move and I'm in pain, and he could see their pain and their discomfort. He could feel it when he was trying to work with them. So he tried to figure out what was another cause or the cause for this pain and restriction of motion. And he discovered what he termed the tension myoneural syndrome. And the root of the tension myoneural syndrome is the observation that if you have a very small disruption in blood flow to tissue, which restricts the oxygen supply to tissue, I don't know whether maybe it's 5 or 10%, for a very short period of time, that's enough to initiate excruciating pain. So if you think about it, if you've ever watched an NFL football game, you've got these people who play with, sprained ankles and dislocated fingers and, back spasms and all this other stuff, but they play through the pain. But if one of them gets a muscle cramp, they are debilitated on the field, and the training corps has to come out and give them fluids and stretch the muscles, because they cannot function if they get a muscle cramp. So if you think about that in terms of this is what tension myoneural syndrome is, only instead of having the entire quad muscle on my thigh go into spasm, what if just a little bundle of muscles in my neck goes into that level of spasm, and it creates a dagger-like stabbing pain in my neck? That's what most people experience when they say their back goes out, or they can't turn their neck and they end up going to a chiropractor. And so what he discovered was this is tension in the body-mind energy system that's been loaded into a certain bundle of muscle fibers, and when it goes into spasm or it gets activated, it cuts off the blood flow to tissue and initiates excruciating pain. So the pain is real, but the physical cause that we assume is responsible for the pain is not responsible for the pain. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if you do something like EFT tapping or reality management worksheets or combine the two of them together, when you have your neck pain or your back pain, you're probably likely to get as good or better relief than if you do all the alternating hot and cold and deep tissue massage and chiropractic adjustment, etc. Now, chiropractic can be really beneficial because if I'm carrying so much, if I have a fall, if I have a car accident or something and my system gets jammed out of alignment, and then the trauma of the accident and the emotions are carried in that part of my body, I can be miserable until I go to a chiropractor. But several different energy techniques that I've been trained in were created by chiropractors who realized they could do everything that their physical training told them to do, and the patient would get better temporarily, and then it would go back. And they could do everything to straighten it out and do the electrical stim and do the deep tissue massage and do the chiropractic adjustment, and the patient would leave the office feeling good, and an hour or two or a day or two later, they'd be back out of whack. So these several different chiropractors said, you know what, there must be something going on here beside just the physical energy system, so let's explore. And they went into mind-body energy work, acupuncture, acupressure work, and built that into a system, a whole health system that looks at toxicity, it looks at nutrition, and it looks at the mind-body energy work, and it looks at the acupuncture meridians. And what they found is, let's say you take the example of a person who has a car accident, they have whiplash, they go to the chiropractor makes a neck adjustment, they feel good for an hour or two, day or two, and then it goes back out. They adjust it again, it goes back out. If the chiropractor is aware and tells the patient to start thinking about the accident or what they were thinking about or feeling right before the accident or what they were thinking about or feeling right after the accident, tap into the emotions and the thoughts that go with it, hold on to that, breathe in a relaxed way, and then they make the adjustment, lo and behold, it doesn't go back out of whack. And because of those experiments in the early work, they've developed things like the neuro-emotional technique and the bioenergetic synchronization technique. These are two different mind-body energy techniques that were created by two different chiropractors and their families. And they're highly beneficial because they don't just rely on the physical sensations and the things that show up on scans. They assume that that physical expression is highly tied to the mental, emotional energies that we either give great credence to or we just watch and learn to allow and breathe and take input from.
So that's interesting because as you were talking, I was remembering, I mentioned about my upper back and neck, and when I had an accident when I was, I think I was 21, where I was parasailing, and the parachute collapsed when I was over land, and I did a free fall to the parachute. Yeah, it just collapsed, and I just fell to the beach. It was like hitting a brick wall. It wasn't a soft landing. And throughout my life, I've had so many falls. So there's obviously some sort of pattern there of injuring myself through falls that needs to be explored.
Well, I've had people I've worked with, and there's a host of them, but there's one that might even be on the call now, where there was this shoulder pain, and we would talk about it, and it would come back when emotional issues would come up, and we'd try and talk about the emotional issues. And so one day we did this. This person just heard me talk about the same kind of thing that I just mentioned to you, and she flashed on the memory that the original shoulder pain that just kept coming back year after year, being so debilitating, happened during a car accident. And the car accident only occurred because somebody was bullying her into doing something she didn't want to do, and was emotionally and verbally abusive to her before and afterwards. And so all of that emotional disruption and pain and dysfunction is energetically loaded into her shoulder. And as we talked about that and did that energy work with that accident in mind, she got a dramatic shift in that disruption in the tissue in her shoulder, and it's never been back as bad. So there's emotional work that's loaded into the trauma that occurred there was an actual trauma that occurred in the accident, but her emotional energy, anger, shame, guilt, fear, whatever, was loaded into that tissue, and when it would get resonated or activated, it would start that tension that would create the disruption in blood flow that would create the pain in the shoulder. Well, until she figured out that the first time that shoulder got injured was in the context of this verbally abusive mess with her ex-husband, until she put those two together, she didn't get any lasting relief from the shoulder pain. And once she began to do the emotional work on those old memories, lasting relief from the shoulder pain was hers.
Okay. That's very helpful.
I had another woman who was in my office, and she walked in limping, and she said she was, in the following week, she had an appointment with her orthopedic surgeon to talk about having her spine fused because she was in such pain and it was so debilitating. So we sat down and started we started our session, and I said to her, you might want to consider that there's an emotional component to that. And she looked at me like I was from Mars, even though she'd known me for years. So she poo-pooed all of that, and she went on talking about what she wanted to talk about in the session. And what she needed to talk about in the session was that she was very upset because she had a weeks-long vacation planned where she was going to take a flight down to some sunnier, warmer climate. And she was afraid that her back pain was going to prevent her from being able to sit in the plane seat, and it was going to ruin the vacation. She wouldn't be able to go. And the next topic was that she doesn't have children, but her cats are her children. And she was devastated that morning because one of her kittens, not kitten, but one of her cats, had peed outside the
litter box
over the weekend, and she thought, oh my God, maybe she's got a urinary tract infection. And so, there's only one veterinarian that this cat lets touch her, and thank goodness that veterinarian was there that Monday, and we were meeting on a Tuesday, and or maybe on a Wednesday evening. And so as she talks about having to take her cat to the veterinarian, she begins crying. She hates crying. She hated crying in front of me. This was almost a fate worse than death, and she couldn't stop it. And she reached for a Kleenex, and her back stabbed at her, and she almost couldn't grab the Kleenex. And so I stepped her through some EFT tapping, and she was telling me this story, sobbing, crying. And I said, now, let me just ask you how old you feel right now. And she said 10. And I said, okay, so what might have been going on when you were 10 that was this intense? And she flashed on an image of being 10 years old on a hot, sunny summer day, standing outside her garage, hearing the sounds of her wicked stepfather torturing her dogs inside the garage. So we breathed and tapped, UFT tapping. You can look it up on YouTube or the internet. It's all free, all kinds of good stuff. Tapping on face points and fingertip points, breathing and saying, it's okay I allow this energy to be here, I release it and let it go. And after 4 or 5 rounds of tapping and crying, she reached for another Kleenex, and she got this surprised look on her face. I said, what's the matter? She said, the back pain's gone. She left my office. She texted me the next day or emailed me the next day, I forget which, still no back pain. She went on the trip, no back pain. We stayed doing sessions once a month for the next 2 years. That back pain never recurred.
Wow.
This was pain that was so severe she was contemplating having her spine fused.
Wow. It's amazing.
So there are people who have a hard time understanding this or believing it could be true, and yet there are people whose lives have been transformed by exploring it, by exploring their own personal, mental, emotional traumas. So I'm going to take a breath and turn on Susan, who put her hand up here.
Okay.
Welcome, Susan.
Hey, I love this. It's so perfect. Thank you for the discussion. I almost regretted putting my hand up because you're on a roll. And I just had a little testimonial, and it's very new, but it's along the same lines. And I've told Ellen about it, I think. I was having very bad knee pain and was taking ibuprofen, and the ibuprofen didn't help, and I couldn't sleep at night. There was such a bad knee aching. I've talked about this with Michael, and this all stems from the work you did with me 3 weeks ago, Chandler, sometime about my mother, the punishments. And Michael said, well, what do you need? Knee, K-N-E-E-D, N-E-E-D. And I said, I don't need anything. He said, but back then you did. What was it you needed? And just like this flash you're talking about the woman, I remembered when I was in 7th grade having a huge crush on one of my female teachers, a beautiful young woman who I had wished would be my mother, and I wished I could sort of mother her. And I developed an imaginary, trumped up, oh, sorry for using that word, ailment called a trick knee. I had read about it in a book, something where the knee gives out and you fall. I staged this dramatic falling with my books flying every which direction. After school one day when she was at her desk and I was the only one in the room, as I headed for the door, I had this dramatic fall, and she didn't even look up. She smelled the huge rat that it was. She simply said, rather coolly, "Are you all right, Susan?" And I got the message right away that this was not going to work. This was just my way of getting attention in a sly way because I wasn't getting it the way I wanted it. I gathered up my books and I said, yeah, I'm fine, thanks. Left. And I remembered doing that. And for some reason, and this is what I don't understand, Dr. Tim, but it's right on what you're talking about applying the lesson that you don't understand, maybe don't agree with. That night I went to bed and had no pain. And I felt even at the moment Michael helped me remember that, I felt this change in my knee. It's almost like the story of the woman with an issue of blood who touched Jesus' garment and knew instantly she'd been healed. I thought, oh, I don't believe this, but my knee feels different. Got up, walked around, no pain. Went to bed that night, and nights were the worst, no pain. I've been teaching Pilates. I've been going up and down hills. No pain. Now, this is new, and I have a doubting mind. So I think, well, maybe it'll come back. But the thing is, connection with the healing. The connection without any intellectual understanding was the healing in that case. And that's what you're talking about. It's amazing.
Yes, indeed.
So even
You are not
without,
alone.
I'm sorry to interject, but so even without like doing a worksheet, and so I guess so the point then of the worksheet is just to get in touch with that and not necessarily to understand it. Is that what I'm hearing?
Listen, Ellen, it is all that and more. It is the potential. Yeah. One of the things I like to tell people is one quick, easy way to think about my unconscious is it's things I've lived through, experienced, thought, and felt in my past that some part of me has decided is too much for me. And so I block it from my conscious awareness with my own mind energy. So if I'm holding something in my awareness that I've already lived through, and it's being held out of my awareness by my own mind energy with the label of, Tim, this would kill you to know this. This is too intense, too painful, too this, that, or the other thing, going to induce too much rage or too much depression, or then it is very difficult for me to convince that fearful part of my mind that it's okay for me to see what it is hiding from me. So every time I pick up a tool, whether it's a reality management worksheet or rounds of EFT tapping or a mind shifter targeted journaling, I do things, I take an action that demonstrates to that part of my mind that I am willing. And eventually, over time, as I do the things to demonstrate my willingness, over time, that fearful part of my mind comes to believe that I am willing and that I can survive, and then it will offer up either to the conscious awareness or just release that energy at the unconscious level.
Wow. That's the thing. I couldn't have remembered that knee thing or had that talk with Michael until I had done several worksheets, both with Dr. Tim and with Michael, or had that talk with Michael until I had done several worksheets, both with Dr. Tim and with Michael. That discussion about my mother and my rage and my this and that went on for a long time before that happened. So you're setting the stage and going through the steps, not knowing where it's going, and trusting or even not trusting, just keeping going. And then it yields fruit. So, yeah.
I love it.
I do
All
too.
right. Well,
I
thank you both for the calls and the comments and the questions. I will put you on mute so we can make a transition if and when somebody else shows up to take over. But thank you so much for calling. This is a Thursday, meaning we'll have again another show tomorrow. Please feel free to come back and join us then. And I will remind us all that we come from love. We're made of this stuff we call love. We actually are the energy of love, and everything else is false. And soon, within minutes, within moments, within seconds, we might have somebody come and take over the second hour. Our call-in number is 563-999-3581. If you call that number and press 1, whoever's running the switchboard in the next hour of the show will see that question mark by your phone number and announce you by your area code. And we're hopeful that what we're doing is of service to you, and we're encouraging you to work with us through the Course in Miracles lessons and or go back and review the archives for this year so far. The last 14 days we've been covering the Course in Miracles lessons and the commentary by Pam Grout from her book. And the purpose, the hope there is, it makes it more accessible to you, that it helps you grab a position or a perspective from which it seems useful to actually stay with and work through the Course in Miracles lessons. Welcome, Jeannie Rice.
Thank you, Dr. Tim.
I have already done the closing, and I'll just invite you to have a great show, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Thank you. All righty.